All right, we're going to start with some very simple preliminaries. First, I am Judge Moses Baker, Jr. I'm presently serving on the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit in Palm Beach County, Florida. Just a little bit about my background. I graduated from Florida A&M University in 1973, and from there went to the University of Florida College of Law, where I graduated in 1975. After that, I was a prosecutor for about 8-9 years, and from there went to join the Searcy Denny firm in West Palm Beach, and in 1994, I was appointed to the Circuit Court bench by Governor Lawton Chiles. We're going to do just a little bit of background with you, Chief Judge Hatchett. So would you tell us just a little bit about your background?
I was born in Clearwater, Florida, educated in the public schools of Pinellas County, following which I attended Florida A&M University, being graduated there in 1954. Spent 2 years in the United States Army as a result of completing the ROTC program at Florida A&M. Following military service, I began the study of law at Howard University, receiving a JD degree in 1959, and of course passing the bar the next year, 1960. Entered the private practice of law at Daytona Beach, where I practiced there privately for about 7 years. Then joined the Department of Justice as an Assistant United States Attorney for the Middle District of Florida, assigned to Jacksonville. Following my prosecuting and U.S. Attorney's days, I became a United States Magistrate full-time in the same district, the Middle District of Florida. Served in that position for about 4 years, and then was named to the Supreme Court of Florida.
All right. Judge Hatchett, I want to read to you some quotes from some of your colleagues who have had some things to say about you and about your career. Chesterfield Smith of Miami had these words to say about you. He said that you were the first African American since Reconstruction to serve as a justice of the Florida Supreme Court and to win a statewide contested election in Florida. He also said that you were the first African American to sit on the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals and now to serve as Chief Judge of the circuit. And also, former Governor Reuben Askew, who appointed you to the Florida Supreme Court in 1975, had these things to say about you. He recalled talking to some of his advisors and close friends regarding your appointment. And he said that he was told that by some of his friends and colleagues that your appointment would be a nice gesture, but it was thought that you had little chance of getting elected statewide. To that comment, Governor Askew responded, "I think this is a good guy, and he is going to be a great Supreme Court justice." And then just one other set of comments from one of your lifelong friends, Cecil Keene. And he had these things to say. He said that you were always positive and ambitious and never listened to those who said you couldn't do it, or you never allowed anyone to pretty much convince you that you couldn't do it, and you always did what you wanted to do. And he said you had those qualities even as you were growing up. I thought I would use those comments to segue into this question. Obviously, you are a man of great integrity, an individual who has accomplished much in your life. And I'd like to ask you, is this a quality that you always had, or is this something that you developed over the years of your career?
Well, all of those remarks are very complimentary, and I'm pleased that I've given that kind of impression, especially to the people who know me the best. First of all, I grew up in a small, loving family of hard-working, God-fearing people. And so I always knew that I was loved, that I was expected to do well, and that nothing short of excellence would be good enough. My mother and my father, although uneducated themselves, preached education as a way out of the morass that African Americans found themselves in the 1930s, at the time when I was born. So I knew early in my life that I would have to prepare myself very well if I were going to do well in the American society. As to when these things developed, I think at my mother's knee probably. And she was always there throughout high school, encouraging and sometimes pushing me on. I had loving brothers. I had 3 older brothers, and they all were hard workers and achievers. And so it was very easy to fall and to follow in their footsteps. As to some of the other remarks they're very complimentary too. In my introduction, I stopped talking about the Supreme Court, but I was appointed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit that encompassed Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas in 1979 by President Carter. Then in 1981, the Congress divided the circuit so that the 11th Circuit was carved out of the 5th Circuit and encompasses now the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, with headquarters at Atlanta. And last month, on October the 1st, I became the chief judge of that circuit, a circuit with about 160 judicial officers and more than 230 employees. The job is primarily administrative. I still have to do all of the jobs of being a judge.
All right. You have anything you'd like to say to those young lawyers who are starting out on their careers?
Yes. I haven't been in the practice of law for a very long time, since I've been on the bench for the past 25 years. So the practice of law has certainly changed as I see what is happening around me in the legal profession. But I think the basic things still remain. Number one, the lawyer must be well trained. Number two, the lawyer must be dedicated to the client's cause. But more than anything else, the lawyer has to have a spirit of public service and realize that as a lawyer, he or she is an intermediary between the conflicting forces in our society. And I suppose that's a long way of saying that the lawyer must have some concern for justice and some concern for the public good, not simply blinded by the wishes and desires of the client. I think those things remained in the practice even from the time I began until now. And we call that now professionalism. It's nothing more than realizing that this is a calling, that the profession is a calling. Law is a calling, certainly like the ministry, certainly like medicine. We take oaths to ideals, unlike so many other types of work that people engage in. So I think that the young lawyer who will play hard and play fair, certainly the client needs to be represented in court, needs to be represented in a boardroom, needs to be represented in dispute settlement outside the courtroom, but the lawyer must never forget that in dealing with that individual client, there's a larger world that the lawyer is dealing with, and that's the conflicting forces in our society. And the lawyer has a responsibility to worry about the justice picture in the country as a whole.
You mentioned professionalism, and of course that's the primary reason why we're here today. I'm going to ask you a question about that, and I want you to listen to the comments of Justice Overton of the Florida Supreme Court when he said these things about you. He said, Justice Hatchett has been the forward scout, the one who has broken new ground, the one who has blazed a new trail, and the one who has shown others the way. But more than that, he has set a high standard of conduct by his demeanor, both in and out of the courtroom, for all people, both black and white. He said that your behavior embodies the term professionalism. I'd like for you to, if you can, just for a moment, talk about professionalism and how you develop that character trait, those qualities of professionalism.
Well, as I said, much of whatever I am started at home with my parents, loving and caring parents. I also went to a very small, all-black high school in Pinellas County, where the teachers there did more than teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. And as I said, my family was always church-oriented, so I regularly attended church services and took part in religious activities. But more than that, I went to law school at Howard University in the late 1950s, 56, 57, 58, when America was wrestling with the problem of what to do about racism and race. And Howard University Law School was the place at that time where the best thinkers in the world on that subject were all gathered. The people who brought the Brown case, for example, the lawyers who handled that, who put those theories together, were all there. And all of us who were lucky enough to be students at that time were involved in that process. And because of what was facing America, we didn't think so much about going out into the world and making money. We came out with an idea that you had to serve, that there was a challenge in America, and that we were the foot soldiers who were going to have to go out and fight those battles and change America to the point where we see it today. And so we were on a mission. So from my first day out of law school, I've sort of been on a mission to make things happen and to make things change. And when you're that busy and that committed, you don't have much time to get into trouble. And also, I've been in government service for a great portion of my years, now 25 on the bench. And being a judge helps you to develop a reputation that is good, because if you're being elected, you won't be elected if you don't do the things that are right, and if you don't impress the lawyers with your professionalism and with your character. On the other hand, if you go into appointed politics, and I've been into both, you're not going to be appointed to the high courts of the state nor the federal government if there are things in your background that are not complimentary. And so it's been very easy for me to do the right thing, and if that is what Justice Overton was referring to, then that's professionalism, and all I tried to do was obey the rules and do those things that were right.
Well, I don't think those things just happen. They take a good deal of work. We have some 60,000 lawyers in this state now, and I understand that there are approximately 9,500 bar complaints each year on average. And I just wonder, is it anything you can say from your experiences that might help lawyers develop this high degree of professionalism that Judge Overton obviously and everybody else obviously has seen in you? What is it that they can do? What would you recommend?
Well, I think we have to start back at the law schools. When I finished law school and was admitted to the bar, we had no such thing as legal ethics. There was no such course in Florida law schools or in my law school for sure. Now we have those courses, but I think we have to change them. I think we have to integrate ethics into every course. That is, if a teacher is teaching torts, that teacher must be able to also talk about the ethical considerations that are involved in the trial of tort cases, in the settlement of tort cases, in discovery in tort cases, and consequently the same thing in contracts or real property. The whole law school, I think, is going to have to become more conscious of ethics and ethical behavior on the part of lawyers. Those of us who are judges have some responsibility too. Number one, we should insist when lawyers appear in our courtrooms that they are civil, that their methods are fair, and that they are ethical lawyers who are well prepared to represent their clients. If they are anywhere short of those standards, and if they do anything unethical, we as judges should be willing to report them to the proper authorities, certainly to counsel them after the hearings or after the trials. So there's a responsibility for the bench to police the bar, to make sure that we do have ethical lawyers who handle matters in a civil way. As to the individual lawyers, I don't think the good lawyers being those who are successful not only in making money but maintaining the respect of their brothers and sisters at the bar, very much engage in unethical conduct. The people who come to the top in this profession, as far as I've been able to see, are the people who are qualified, do a good job, represent their clients well, and are ethical. So there's nothing to be gained, I would say to all of those 60,000 lawyers. There's little to be gained by being an unethical lawyer, engaging in sharp practices, doing things that are not civil with other lawyers. So it's a losing proposition, I would say to them, and in the long run, they will regret their conduct.
Today, perhaps more than ever, we as a profession, judges and lawyers, are focusing on professionalism. I realize that you've had some 25 years of experiences in our courts. And I'd like to, if you can, share with us your observations over those years regarding the ethics of lawyers and professionalism. Specifically, have things gotten better? Have they gotten worse? Have they remained the same? Do you have observations in that regard?
Well, my quick answer would be things are worse. But you have to remember I started practicing over 30 years ago in a very small town where all of the lawyers knew each other by first names for sure, and where lawyers could depend on each other due to that friendship and due to the size of the legal community to keep each other straight. We now, as you say, have 60,000 lawyers in Florida. The lawyers do not regularly litigate against each other anymore. They're out-of-state law firms, very large law firms, and so I hear a great deal about unethical practice. I hear about what some judges call Rambo lawyers, lawyers who are not civil towards each other. On the appellate bench, I don't see very much of anything unethical. Every now and then we send a brief back to a party and ask them would they please take something out, or we strike a brief on the motion of the other side. But generally at the federal appellate level, lawyers perform well, and I don't see very much unethical conduct. I hear so much about it. I hear so much about it from trial judges. And so based upon that, I think, yes, it is getting worse. The other reason I think it's getting worse is because we talk about professionalism so much now. That is the main topic in the legal community now. And that's for some good reason. It didn't just happen. Lawyers are worried about the profession and whether it's a calling and whether there's any public service involved in the lawyering. I hear from young associates, some of my former law clerks, who go away to the large law firms, that they're dissatisfied after 3 or 4 years, that they don't feel they're doing anything that is meaningful. Meaningful in the sense of having a worth to the general society, rather than simply making money and serving the client and doing whatever the client wants. So I know that the world perceives it to be worse, and I get the reflection from what I hear from trial judges and what I hear at Bar Association meetings.
All right, you mentioned hearing from other judges comments that lawyers sometimes in court proceedings are not civil
Yes.
to each other. I can tell you from where I sit, I see that often,
Yes.
and it's not a pleasing sight. One of your former colleagues, again, Chesterfield Smith, who served as co-chair of your Supreme Court election campaign in 1976, said that he recalled that your opposition ran a campaign based upon deliberate, calculated inaccuracies and innuendos. But he said this about you, and I want to quote him. He said, "But Judge Hatchett took the high road and refused to be dragged to the level on which his opposition chose to fight." And I like to use that comment, which is a wonderful comment about you, and I think it says so much about your professional ethics, your professionalism. But what can you say to those young lawyers or lawyers out there who are not civil to each other? They find themselves, unfortunately, entering that fight or being reduced to the level of their opposition. What would you say?
Well, I say the same thing I said a few minutes ago. Nothing is gained, much is lost, and so little gained by taking the low road. This is a high calling, the practice of law and the profession. It's a very high calling. We take into our hands as judges and lawyers people's lives, their properties, their hopes, their dreams, and sometimes we have to deal with their disappointments. It's hard enough to do this job well, even on the high road. And if you take the low road, it's going to be miserable to the client, it's going to be miserable to the lawyer, it's going to be bad for the system. And so nothing is gained in the system or to the client or to the lawyer by engaging in unethical or uncivil type of behavior. The great lawyers generally don't do it. And generally when you see the low type of fightings and scurrying, and it's usually over such minor and foolish things, that it's disgusting. And the client must feel that too when the client is present and sees the lawyer conducting him or herself in that manner. And so sooner or later, the lawyers who engage in that kind of conduct stay at the bottom and never rise to the top.
I guess in closing, then, I'd like to give you a few minutes, if you would, and just sort of summarize or close on your philosophy regarding professional ethics and professionalism in our courtrooms, in court system.
I can't think of anything that's more important to the profession than professionalism. After all, we are trained in an art that we should pursue not only for the good of clients, but for the good of society. Every burning issue that people face in this country will sooner or later end up in a courtroom. And those issues are the issues that shape the lives and the hopes of American citizens and people from all over the world, in fact. Therefore, what we're doing is a noble thing. As long as the lawyer simply thinks that I have a case of a client who's a landlord against someone who's a renter, and that's all there is to this, then we're not being professional. The lawyer has to think that I have a case that's going to affect the relationship between renters and landlords all over this state and all over this city. And I have a responsibility to my profession and to the system that I'm a part of to see that a just result comes out of this dispute. And that's what we do. We resolve disputes. And judges resolve them, lawyers bring them. And all of us have a responsibility to see the broader picture. And without professionalism, you're simply digging a ditch, as I would put it, without understanding what is really going on. I guess the best way that I can say it is a story I heard about two men on a construction job where a cathedral was being built, and they were both pushing wheelbarrows. And someone asked the first one, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm taking bricks to build a building." They asked the other fellow, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." It's just a matter of how you view what you're doing. And in professionalism, we are talking about the lawyer who sees justice as the result and the pettiness as something that will impede and place hurdles in the road to justice. And so in my view, professionalism must be the thing that this profession must every day worry about. Otherwise, our profession will be no calling at all, no profession at all, just another job, just like driving a truck or anything else. And there's nothing wrong with driving a truck if you have a dream, but there's something wrong with representing clients if you don't have the dream.